Imagine you're, sitting in a quiet library, deciphering this ancient manuscript.
Oh, it's setting the scene. I like it.
Right. You're scanning through these tedious historical lineages, archaic property laws, and then suddenly you stumble across a single, highly ambiguous word.
Just one word.
Just one. And that tiny linguistic anomaly somehow goes on to spawn thousands of years of furious theological debate, massive fake fossil discoveries, and even blockbuster video game franchises.
Pretty wild when you put it like that.
It really is. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking you on a journey into one of the most fascinating mysteries of ancient literature, the Nephilim. Our mission today is to, extract the truth from the lore.
And there is a lot of lore.
So much. We're looking at a stack of sources ranging from the Hebrew Bible to extensive historical and encyclopedic archives to figure out who or what these enigmatic figures actually were and why, thousands of years later they still captivate us.
It really is a masterclass in how a vacuum of information inevitably gets filled by human imagination. I mean, the foundational text, the very first place this word appears, gives the reader almost nothing to go on.
Yeah, the text you're talking about is the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. It's placed right before the famous story of Noah's Ark.
Right.
The passage cryptically describes a time when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they had children together. And the text just simply concludes, the same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown.
That is essentially the genesis of the entire mystery, just a handful of sentences.
It feels exactly like sitting in a movie theater, right? The lights go down and the trailer for this massive new sci-fi epic starts playing.
Oh, absolutely.
The voiceover drops this huge piece of world-building lore, demigods, ancient heroes, cosmic unions, but provides zero context for any of it. The trailer just cuts to black and you're left sitting there desperately trying to fill in the blanks.
Who are the sons of God? Who are the mighty men? Because the biblical text refuses to explicitly define them, later Jewish and Christian writers, and eventually, like you said, secular pop culture, they had to step in to shape our understanding.
Which got very messy very quickly.
Very messy. To really grasp how confusing this got, we actually need to look at the etymology. The Hebrew root of the word Nephilim is NPL, which simply means to fall.
Okay, wait. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that. If the root word just means to fall, how does that translate into, a physical being?
That is where the linguistic debate begins, and it is fiercely contested. Some scholars argue it's a passive form, meaning the fallen ones.
And okay, that makes sense.
Others, like the 19th century linguist Robert Baker Girdlestone, suggest it comes from a causative stem. So in that case, it would mean those who cause others to fall.
Oh, implying like a race of violent oppressors or tyrants.
Exactly. Or it could simply refer to fallen warriors, just men who fell in battle. But notice what is entirely missing from all of those literal translations.
There's absolutely no mention of physical height.
None at all.
Which is wild, because if you ask almost anyone today what a Nephilim is, they will instantly tell you they were towering giants.
Yeah.
So how did a word that means to fall morph into an ancient race of giants?
The shift happens largely because of this massive translation effort known as the Septuagint. Around the 3rd century BC, Jewish scholars in Alexandria were translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek.
Okay.
When they encountered the Hebrew word Nephilim, they had a critical choice to make. A strict literal translation into Greek would have been peptakotes, meaning the fallen ones.
But I'm guessing they didn't use that.
Nope. Instead, they chose the Greek word gigantes.
Wait, gigantes, that translates directly to our English word giant. So the translators are the ones who literally made them huge.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. We hear gigantes and immediately think of physical size. But in ancient Greek mythology, gigantes didn't primarily mean physically enormous.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Greek gigantes were an ancient race born from the earth. They were chaotic beings of immense strength and aggression, deeply connected to the underworld.
So they were more like monsters.
Right. They were a terrifying mixture of the human and the divine,
Yeah.
posing a serious danger to the order of the gods. So the translators looked at the Nephilim, these ambiguous, potentially hybrid, chaotic warriors from the ancient past, and thought they functioned exactly like the Greek gigantes.
I get it. So they were trying to capture a vibe.
Exactly.
They used a culturally relevant word for their Greek-speaking audience to describe a chaotic, superhuman threat. They were translating the concept, not handing down a biological height measurement.
Precisely. But, a few hundred years later, when the Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, was compiled, it just transcribed that Greek word gigantes directly into Latin.
And it stuck.
Yep. From there, the tradition of the giant progeny was permanently cemented into Western literature.
I do want to push back on this a little, though. Doesn't the Bible actually describe them as physically huge later on?
You're thinking of Numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They show up a second time in the book of Numbers. Moses sends spies to scout out the land of Canaan, and the spies come back absolutely terrified. They report seeing the descendants of the Nephilim, and they claim they felt like grasshoppers by comparison.
Yeah, that specific passage has definitely been the anchor for the giant interpretation for centuries. I mean, the imagery of feeling like a grasshopper next to a human is incredibly potent.
But is it meant to be taken as a literal historical record of 10-foot-tall men stomping around the desert? Or is this just the ancient equivalent of an exaggerated fish story? Like, you get spooked in the dark and suddenly the guy you saw was 12 feet tall.
Most modern scholars lean toward the fish story explanation. They view it as rhetorical emphasis driven by sheer panic.
Panic makes sense.
It does. And the archaeologist G.E. Wright proposed a very compelling theory about this. He pointed out the architectural reality of what the Israelites were encountering.
Okay, what were they encountering?
Well, they were a nomadic people, used to living in tents. And suddenly, they walk up to the cities of Canaan, which featured what archaeologists call Cyclopean masonry.
Cyclopean masonry, that sounds intense.
It is. We're talking about walls built with boulders so massive that later generations assumed only a cyclops could have lifted them. Some of these ancient defensive walls in Canaan were up to 18 feet thick.
Oh, wow.
Wright argues that the Israelites saw these imposing, impenetrable fortresses, and their minds simply supplied a terrifying narrative. Giant structures must have been built by giant men.
I mean, if you put yourself in the shoes of a nomadic traveler seeing an 18-foot thick stone wall for the first time, you probably don't marvel at the local engineering and supply chain logistics. You think, monsters built this and we need to run.
Exactly. And the archaeological record fully supports that psychological theory. Extensive excavations of ancient Canaanite sites show that the people living there, both before and after 3000 BC, were just completely average in height for the era.
So no giant skeletons.
No significant findings of abnormally sized human skeletons at all.
Even without the skeletons, the lore around their size got completely out of hand in other historical texts. Like, I came across a reference to an Ethiopian translation of the Book of Enoch claiming the Nephilim were 300 cubits tall.
Oh yeah, that one.
If you do the math on a standard ancient cubit, that makes them 450 feet tall. You aren't fighting a warrior at that point, you're fighting Godzilla.
That is a staggering visual. But thankfully for ancient humanity, that specific detail was a massive translation error.
Wait, really? A typo made them 450 feet tall?
Basically. When scholars cross-reference that Ethiopian text with earlier Greek manuscripts, they realized the original phrasing wasn't discussing height at all. It was detailing a genealogy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the 300 referred to 3 distinct races of beings that supposedly descended from this lineage: the Nephilim, the Nephil, and the Eljo.
It's incredible how a simple clerical error turns a family tree into a skyscraper-sized monster.
Right. We actually see similar escalations of scale in other cultural traditions as well.
Yeah.
In Islamic traditions, the Quran refers to the ancient people of Ad. The prophet Hud describes them using language very similar to the Hebrew Goram, meaning mighty men. As the legend of the people of Ad grew over the centuries, some accounts claim the tallest among them were 100 feet high.
100 feet?
They were said to be so massive that some survived the Great Flood simply because the water didn't reach past their knees.
That is amazing. Every culture seems to scale up the villains of their ancient history. But if they weren't literal giants, then where did these fearsome warriors actually come from? Who were their parents?
Oh, the million-dollar question.
Because trying to answer that question leads us right into the most sensational interpretation of the Nephilim, the fallen angel theory.
This is the interpretation that truly captures the imagination. It takes that cryptic phrase, sons of God, from Genesis 6, and interprets it completely, literally, as divine angelic beings.
The mythology here is basically ancient sci-fi. Texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees flesh out this entire narrative about a rebellious sect of angels known as the Watchers.
Yes, the Watchers.
Yeah. Their leader is an angel named Samyaza. According to the lore, these Watchers look down from heaven, see human women, and are just overcome with lust. So 200 of them descend to the summit of Mount Hermon. They literally swear a blood oath to each other, bind themselves by mutual curses, and then take human wives.
And the offspring of that forbidden union are the Nephilim.
Exactly.
It is a deeply cinematic narrative. And it's crucial for you to understand that this wasn't just some fringe fan fiction whispered in back alleys. This interpretation was widely accepted during what we call the Second Temple period.
For those who might not know, what exactly is the Second Temple period?
It's the era of Jewish history lasting roughly from 500 BC to 70 AD. It was a time when Jewish theology was incredibly dynamic. It was heavily influenced by Persian and Hellenistic thought, and apocalyptic ideas were flourishing.
So they were very open to cosmic drama.
Very. From the 3rd century BC onwards, you see this fallen angel belief reflected in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the writings of the prominent historian Josephus. Even early Christian apologists, writers like Tertullian, who defended the faith in the 2nd century AD, they fully embraced the idea that angelic beings took physical form and mated with humans.
But hold on, that doesn't track with other parts of the biblical text. Doesn't Jesus specifically say in the Gospel of Matthew that angels in heaven do not marry?
He does, yes.
So how can a theological system support angels fathering children if they lack the concept of physical reproduction?
You've hit on the primary theological plot hole right there. And it is the exact reason why many later theologians vigorously rejected the fallen angel theory. I mean, if angels are purely spiritual beings, the entire premise falls apart.
Exactly.
However, the proponents of the angel theory have historically offered a fascinating counterargument.
Which is what?
They argue that just because angels don't marry in heaven doesn't mean they are biologically incapable of physical acts if they intentionally take physical form on earth.
Oh, interesting.
They frame it as a matter of willful celibacy. In heaven, angels are obedient to their station. But the Watchers specifically chose to violate that boundary. They abandoned their spiritual state to indulge in physical desires.
So it wasn't that they lacked the equipment, it was that they broke the ultimate cosmic rule.
Yes, beautifully put.
And the consequences of that rule breaking supposedly echo all the way down through biblical lore. Have you heard of Dr. Michael Heiser's theory on this?
In his book, The Unseen Realm, yes, I have. He synthesizes ancient Near Eastern thought with biblical theology in a very compelling way.
I found it absolutely mind-blowing. He proposes that when the flood came and wiped out these Nephilim hybrids, their physical bodies died, but because they were half angelic, their spirits couldn't just pass on normally.
When they were stuck.
God supposedly cursed these disembodied, corrupted spirits to remain wandering the earth. And according to Heiser's reading of the ancient texts, these wandering Nephilim spirits became what the New Testament later refers to as demons.
It's brilliant because it provides a cohesive origin story for demons within that specific biblical framework. It links the corruption of the pre-flood world directly to the spiritual warfare described centuries later by Jesus and his disciples.
That makes so much sense.
The New Testament epistles of Jude and 2 Peter even seem to nod to this. They make references to angels who abandoned their proper dwelling and were locked in eternal chains in gloomy darkness, specifically mentioning Tartarus, the Greek abyss of torment.
Okay, so we have a sprawling epic involving rogue angels swearing blood oaths on mountains, half-breed superhuman warlords, and the literal origin of demons. It is incredibly dramatic.
Sorry.
But I have to assume that Orthodox religious leaders were not thrilled with the idea of literal demigods running around in their sacred texts. I mean, it sounds way too much like Greek mythology.
It presented a massive theological crisis. If you're trying to establish and protect a strict monotheistic religion, one God, supreme and separate from creation, having rogue demigods running around, severely compromises your theology.
I can imagine.
This discomfort gave rise to the second major interpretation, the grounded, strictly human approach, often called the Sons of Seth view.
How grounded are we talking?
Very grounded. Orthodox Judaism wanted to stamp out the angel theory entirely. In the 2nd century AD, a prominent leader named Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai actually pronounced a formal curse on anyone who taught that the sons of God were angels.
A curse over a translation debate? That seems a little extreme.
Well, you have to consider the context of the 2nd century. Judaism was navigating the destruction of their temple by the Romans, the rise of early Christianity, and the constant pressure of surrounding pagan cultures.
Right, cultures that worshipped pantheons of gods who constantly mated with humans.
Exactly. Rabbi Shimon felt that allowing the angel theory to stand was basically letting pagan polytheism slip in through the back door.
That makes a lot of sense.
Later on, major Christian theologians like St. Augustine and John Calvin also adopted this human-centric view to protect the sovereignty of God.
But if they weren't angels, how did these leaders explain the phrase sons of God without committing heresy?
According to the Sons of Seth theory, the sons of God were simply the righteous human descendants of Seth. Seth was the third son of Adam and Eve, and his lineage was considered faithful to God.
Oh, okay.
The daughters of men, on the other hand, were the wicked, rebellious descendants of Cain.
Oh, I see where this is going. It's essentially an ancient Romeo and Juliet scenario, but on a tribal scale.
Exactly.
You have two deeply divided human factions. One is the holy covenant-keeping tribe, and the other is the corrupt, worldly tribe. So the ultimate sin that triggered the flood wasn't some cosmic interdimensional breeding program.
No, it was just forbidden intermingling. The righteous tribe broke their purity by intermarrying with the wicked tribe.
Right.
The offspring of this union, the Nephilim, weren't literal demigods. They were just the product of a morally bankrupt generation, violent, ruthless, human warlords who caused others to fall.
That totally changes the genre of the text. It shifts from a supernatural sci-fi thriller to, like, a gritty historical drama about tribal politics and moral decay.
And if we look at the theological why behind this shift, you can see why Augustine and Calvin championed it. The angel theory implies that humans were somewhat the victims of a cosmic invasion by rogue spirits.
Which takes the heat off of us.
Right. But the Sons of Seth theory places the blame for the flood entirely back onto humanity. It's about human moral corruption, our tribal disobedience, and our own failure to maintain purity.
It definitely makes the moral lesson much more direct for the reader. But regardless of whether people believed they were angel hybrids or just massive human warlords, the belief in the Nephilim was so powerful that for centuries, people literally went out digging in the dirt to find physical proof of them.
Oh, the history of paleontology is deeply intertwined with the search for biblical giants. Before the scientific community understood the fossil record or extinction, any discovery of massive bones was immediately viewed through the lens of Scripture.
I mean, what else could a massive femur be if not the remains of a pre-flood giant? Reading about some of these historical hoaxes and misidentifications is highly entertaining. And it wasn't just a fringe hobby. Major scientific and religious figures were involved.
Absolutely they were. Take the events in Lucerne, Switzerland in 1577. Locals unearthed enormous bones, and the town was just thrown into an uproar.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, the leading experts of the day confidently declared them to be the remains of an antediluvian giant, meaning a Nephilim, who lived before the Great Flood. They even calculated the giant would have been 19 feet tall.
And they built the town's identity around it, right?
They did. It became a massive point of pride.
And it took, what, over 200 years for someone to burst their bubble?
Yes, in 1786, an anatomist named Johann Friedrich Blumenbach finally examined the bones and politely informed everyone that they belonged to a woolly mammoth.
That is heartbreaking for them, but so funny.
We see the exact same cognitive bias in early American history, too. In 1705, the highly influential Puritan minister, Cotton Mather, was presented with massive fossilized teeth found near Albany, New York.
Let me guess. He didn't think it was a dinosaur.
Not at all. Mather viewed the entire world through a strict biblical framework. He proudly published accounts claiming these teeth belonged to the wicked Nephilim who had drowned in Noah's flood.
Wow.
He used them as physical proof of human depravity. Today, we know they were mastodon teeth.
You just have to laugh. A guy finds a giant molar in the dirt and thinks, yep, that is a fallen angel hybrid, instead of maybe there was a really big hairy elephant living here.
It's the ultimate confirmation bias.
And then there were the intentional frauds, right? The Cardiff Giant in 1869 is a classic. A man literally carved a 10-foot figure out of gypsum, buried it on a farm in upstate New York, and charged people money to come see the petrified biblical giant.
People lined up for it. It highlights a profound human desire to find physical, tangible validation for our ancient mythologies.
We want the magic to be real.
We really do. But while you won't find many archaeologists searching for Nephilim bones today, the concept hasn't disappeared. The Nephilim have found a remarkably resilient second life. They simply migrated from theology into pop culture.
I can personally attest to that. If you play video games, watch anime, read fantasy novels, you have encountered them, they are everywhere.
They serve as the perfect foundational lore for modern world building. In the game franchise Darksiders, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are reimagined as Nephilim, created by the unholy union of angels and demons.
That's a huge franchise.
And in Diablo 3, the Nephilim are the ancient ancestors of humanity possessing unimaginable power.
Even Indiana Jones is dealing with them now. In the new Great Circle game, Indy goes up against a secret Vatican order of giants who claim to be the direct descendants of the Nephilim. The word just carries an inherent weight, doesn't it?
It really does.
It sounds like ancient, forbidden power.
It does. And this fascination is part of a shared human heritage. Across the globe, cultures have always gravitated toward the archetype of the hybrid, pre-flood superhuman.
We talked about the Greek gigantes earlier.
Right, but look at Sumerian mythology with the Apkallu 7 ancient semi-divine heroes who brought wisdom to humanity before a catastrophic flood.
That sounds incredibly familiar.
Or, in Arabian paganism, you find beliefs that fallen angels took human form and fathered hybrid children, like Abu Juhum, the legendary ancestor of an ancient tribe.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. Why should you care about an obscure Hebrew word buried in a genealogy? The story of the Nephilim perfectly illustrates how a single ancient text acts as a cultural mirror.
That's a great way to put it.
Every single generation projects their own anxieties, politics, and interests onto that one word. For ancient readers terrified of the unknown, they were a warning about divine corruption and evil spirits. For medieval theologians, they were a strict moral lesson about human depravity.
And for us today, sitting in front of our screens, they are an endless source of incredible sci-fi and fantasy.
Exactly. It's a mirror constantly reflecting the era that reads it.
But I want to leave you with one final, lingering concept to ponder, courtesy of biblical professor Brian R. Doak.
Oh, I love his work. What's the concept?
When we look at all these neighboring ancient cultures, the Greeks, the Sumerians, the Arabians, they all had these beloved demigods and larger-than-life heroes.
Right.
Doak suggests that the Nephilim lore in Genesis wasn't just a myth. It was a deliberate, calculated polemic.
A polemic, like a piece of theological propaganda against their neighbor.
Exactly. Imagine the ancient Israelites looking at the epic hero tropes of the surrounding nations, their Hercules, their glorious demigods, and cleverly writing them into their own holy text.
Oh, I see where this is going.
But they didn't write them in as heroes. They wrote them in as the wicked, corrupt, doomed villains whose very existence ruined the earth and necessitated a global flood.
That is the ultimate theological power move. You take the mighty heroes that your enemies worship and you rewrite them as the monsters of your own story.
It's brilliant.
And it all traces back to a single word that simply meant to fall. Well, keep questioning the text you read, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Imagine stepping into a global financial universe where banks, stockbrokers, and credit checks simply do not exist.
Like they're just gone.
Right, completely gone. There are no opening hours, no branch managers, and zero customer service lines.
None.
Instead, you enter this system where you can borrow millions of dollars in a millisecond with absolutely zero collateral. The only catch is that you have to follow the unbending, mathematically pure laws of computer code.
Which sounds like sci-fi, but it's very real.
It is. That is decentralized finance, or DeFi, but behind that utopian promise of, code is law, there's a graveyard of billion-dollar hacks, algorithmic bank runs, and massive regulatory battles.
A lot of collateral damage.
Exactly. So
Right.
today, we are opening up a massive stack of sources to really demystify how this alternate financial architecture actually works. We want to explore the wild highs, the devastating hacks, and figure out if it is the future of money or just a digital Wild West.
It's a bit of both, honestly.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Before we look at the billions of dollars made and lost, we have to understand the basic plumbing. Like, how do you actually build a lending and borrowing system without a bank?
Well, you replace the bank with code. Specifically, you use something called a smart contract running on a public, permissionless blockchain.
And Ethereum was the network that really proved this concept back in 2017, right?
Exactly, yeah. Ethereum laid the groundwork.
I think the term smart contract sounds incredibly intimidating to a lot of people.
What?
What is it actually doing?
Think of it like a digital vending machine.
Okay, a vending machine.
Yeah. You walk up to a vending machine, insert a dollar, and press a button. The machine doesn't verify your identity.
Right.
It doesn't check your credit score or ask what you plan to do with the soda. It just executes a hard-coded rule. If the dollar is deposited and the button is pressed, dispense the drink.
Ah, I see.
A smart contract takes that exact same automated, self-executing logic and applies it to complex financial services.
And because it lives on a public blockchain, anyone globally can interact with that vending machine.
Anyone with an internet connection.
So you are completely bypassing traditional background checks. There are no anti-money laundering verifications and no know your customer protocols, no KYC.
Which is the core ethos of the whole movement. It is entirely permissionless.
But the sources make a fascinating point about how this software is built. They use the term money Legos.
I love that analogy.
Well, me too. So instead of building a monolithic piece of software, developers are just stacking these different layers together. Like there's a settlement layer, an asset layer, a protocol layer, an application layer, and an aggregator layer.
What's fascinating here is the concept of composability.
Composability.
Yeah. Because these smart contracts are open source, they function as neutral public infrastructure, meaning anyone can build on top of them.
So let's actually build one of these out. Let's say the base layer, like the big green Lego plate on the bottom, is the Ethereum blockchain itself. That handles the settlement.
Right, the foundation.
Then I want to create a token. So I snap an asset Lego onto the board.
And someone else can come along and snap a lending protocol Lego directly on top of your asset Lego.
Okay.
And then another developer could snap a trading interface, the application layer on top of that, and then an aggregator Lego on top to find the best prices.
It is entirely modular. I mean, in traditional finance, if you want two different banking systems to communicate, you are looking at years of red tape.
Oh, lawyers, intermediaries taking a cut.
Yeah, proprietary software clashes. But in DeFi, interoperability is the default state.
It has to be. The code is out in the open. You don't have to ask for permission to plug your new financial product into an existing pool of money. You just write the script and deploy it.
But of course, once developers proved these money Legos worked, human nature took over.
As it always does.
Right. People didn't just want neutral infrastructure. They wanted to generate profit. And that is when this space evolves from a technical experiment into an absolute frenzy.
Oh, a total gold rush. To understand the sheer scale of the 2020 boom, we really need to look at what set the stage.
Right. Take us back a bit.
Back in 2017, a platform called MakerDAO launched. They solved a massive problem for this ecosystem by introducing a stablecoin pegged to the US dollar.
This was called DAI, right? Though I think the sources mention it went through a major rebrand to USDS in 2024 via the Sky rebrand.
Yes, exactly. DAI, now USDS.
Because if you are trying to take out a loan, you don't want to use a volatile asset like Bitcoin where the value could drop 40% in a week. You need stability.
Exactly. And MakerDAO proved you could maintain a stable $1 asset value completely decentralized. They just used smart contracts to manage collateral and liquidations.
Wow.
It worked so well that it gave the ecosystem a reliable foundation. But the real gasoline on the fire that came in June 2020...
That's your compound finance.
Yes. Compound changed the game entirely.
Yeah.
They didn't just offer interest to people who lent their cryptocurrency. They started handing out their own native token called Comp as a reward simply for using the platform.
It altered the incentive structure of the entire industry.
Completely.
If I translate this to the real world, it's like walking into a Chase bank, depositing $100 into a savings account, and the teller hands you 10 shares of Chase stock just to say thank you.
That is a very helpful way to picture it, but with a crucial difference.
Which is?
Traditional banks are heavily regulated, and those shares are tied to actual corporate earnings. In DeFi, these new tokens were immediately tradable on the open market, and their value was driven purely by speculation.
Which sparked what the sources call yield farming, or liquidity mining.
Yeah, yield farming was madness.
Users realized they could rapidly shift massive amounts of capital between different platforms to maximize their total return. They were hunting for the base interest, the trading fees, and these bonus tokens, all at the exact same time.
And because the code is open source, other developers instantly copy-pasted Compound's model. Suddenly, there were hundreds of platforms offering their own governance tokens, promising astronomical returns to attract capital.
So what does this all mean for the underlying value of the system? Because I have to push back on this entire era.
Go for it.
When you read the sources, it describes a scenario where people are locking up billions of dollars in unproven code just to earn a token that only has value because other people are doing the exact same thing.
It was highly reflexive.
Yeah. I mean, even Michael Novogratz, a massive crypto investor, called some of these setups quote-unquote Ponzi-like.
And the broader context of the market proved that critique was entirely warranted. The economics driving yield farming were completely circular.
Right.
The advertised yields were astronomically high, sometimes hundreds of percent, because the reward tokens were skyrocketing in price. And the reward tokens were skyrocketing because the high yields were driving extreme hype and demand.
A textbook speculative feedback loop.
Exactly. It drove the total value locked the TVL across DeFi to a peak of $180 billion by November 2021.
180 billion, that is staggering.
It is. But a feedback loop works in both directions.
The crash.
Right. When the broader crypto market crashed in 2022, largely triggered by the implosion of the Terra LNA ecosystem and the collapse of FTX, the leverage in the system unwound violently.
And people panicked.
Yields vanished, token prices collapsed, and by 2023, the total collateral locked in these platforms had shrunk to under $40 billion.
Wow. From 180 to under 40.
It washed away a lot of the speculative noise and showed us exactly which money Legos were actually built on solid ground.
But there is a practical mechanical question here. If you are yield farming and moving millions of dollars between these protocols, you still have to trade one token for another.
You do.
And you can't rely on a traditional centralized exchange, like a CEX, because that requires giving custody of your funds to a company, which defeats the whole purpose of being decentralized.
Exactly. So the ecosystem had to invent decentralized exchanges, or DX. And to do that, they had to completely reinvent how trading actually works.
Because traditional finance relies on order books, right?
Yes. On the New York Stock Exchange, you have buyers bidding a specific price and sellers asking a specific price. A centralized market maker sits in the middle and matches them up.
But on a blockchain, maintaining a constantly updating order book is way too slow and way too expensive.
So platforms like Uniswap bypassed the order book entirely. They created automated market makers, or AMMs. Instead of trading against another human being, you are trading against a smart contract.
Like a pool of funds.
Right, a liquidity pool that is funded by other users. And those users providing the tokens earn a cut of the trading fees.
So there's no central entity matching orders at all?
None. An algorithm just dynamically adjusts the price based on the changing supply and demand inside that specific pool.
This decentralized trading architecture paved the way for what I think is the most mind-blowing innovation in all of our sources.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Flash loans. Max Wolf pioneered this at Marble Protocol in 2018, and Aave really popularized it. It is an uncollateralized loan of an arbitrary amount.
It's incredible.
Meaning, you can borrow millions of dollars without putting up a single cent of your own money to back it up.
Which breaks every fundamental rule of traditional risk assessment.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Let's try to map this onto a real-world scenario to see how absurd it sounds.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine I walk into a bank and borrow $1 million to buy a house. I instantly flip that house to a new buyer for $1.2 million. I pay the bank back their original million, plus a tiny fee, and I pocket the profit.
But in the world of DeFi, you have a rigid constraint. You have to do the borrowing, the purchasing, the flipping, and the repaying within a single blockchain block.
In the exact same millisecond.
Precisely. Because it is all coded into a single transaction.
But wait, what if I can't find a buyer for the house? What if the flip fails?
Then the smart contract triggers a failsafe. It simply rejects the entire operation. Time essentially rewinds, the state of the blockchain resets, and from the network's perspective, the loan never even happened.
That is wild. Time rewinds. So the lender literally cannot lose their money because the loan only exists if it's guaranteed to be paid back in the same moment.
Exactly.
But how is someone practically using this?
The original intent was benign. It was designed for arbitrage.
Right.
If a token is trading for $1 on Uniswap, but $1.05 on another exchange, a user could flash loan a massive amount of capital, buy the cheap tokens, sell them on the expensive exchange, and close the price gap instantly. It keeps the decentralized markets highly efficient.
But the sources highlight that this tool is frequently weaponized.
Unfortunately, yes. Because anyone can borrow an unlimited amount of money for a millisecond, malicious actors use flash loans to launch devastating attacks.
They just manipulate the market.
Yeah. They borrow massive sums, intentionally dump those tokens onto an automated exchange to artificially crash the price.
Oh, wow.
Exploit the algorithms, drain the liquidity pool, and then pay back the flash loan with their stolen profits.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Even if you aren't getting hit by a highly sophisticated flash loan attack, just being a regular participant in these liquidity pools carries huge invisible risks.
It really does.
The sources talk extensively about impermanent loss.
This is a risk entirely unique to automated market makers. Most of these pools rely on a very simple mathematical rule called the constant product formula. It is just X times Y equals K.
Okay, wait, let's break that math down so it actually makes sense. I need some round numbers here.
Sure. Imagine you deposit 10 Ethereum and 10,000 US dollars into a liquidity pool.
Okay, 10 Ethereum, $10,000.
The smart contract multiplies those two quantities. 10 times 10,000 equals 100,000.
Right.
That number 100,000 is your constant. That's K. No matter what trades happen in that pool, the formula must stay balanced to equal 100,000.
Okay, so what happens if the price of Ethereum suddenly spikes on the outside market, like on a centralized exchange?
That is where the trouble starts. If Ethereum becomes much more valuable elsewhere, arbitrage bots will flood into your pool because your automated algorithm is still offering the old, cheaper price.
Oh, I see.
To buy that cheap Ethereum, the bots have to put dollars into the pool.
And as the pool loses Ethereum and gains dollars, the algorithm has to constantly recalculate the price to maintain that mathematical constant of 100,000.
Exactly. The algorithm is blindly rebalancing. So by the time the trading stops, the pool is left with significantly less of the highly valuable Ethereum and a lot more of the less valuable dollars.
Which means, if I decide to withdraw my funds at that moment, I am walking away with less total wealth than if I had just kept my original 10 Ethereum sitting safely in my own private wallet.
You did. You essentially subsidized someone else's arbitrage profit.
That's rough. And that isn't the only structural hazard, right? Because blockchains are inherently transparent, your transactions sit in a public waiting area before they are processed by the network.
Yes, the mempool.
Right, which opens the door to front-running.
Yeah, front running is a huge issue.
It feels like legalized theft. If I submit a trade that is going to be highly profitable, an automated miner bot can see my pending transaction, copy my exact trade, and then sneak their own transaction ahead of mine.
They step right in front of you.
They take the favorable price and leave me with what the sources call slippage, a worse exchange rate than I anticipated.
It is a persistent, invisible tax on the ecosystem. Market price impact and front-running are constant threats.
But beyond the invisible taxes and the complex math, there is a much darker reality to a system with no central authority.
The ultimate paradox.
Right. If there is no bank manager and no customer service line, there's absolutely no safety net. If you lose your password, your money is gone into the ether forever.
Gone.
And if a smart contract gets hacked, the transactions are completely irreversible.
The scale of the crime is hard to comprehend. In 2021, the sources indicate that half of all cryptocurrency crime globally was tied directly to DeFi. Half. And the vulnerabilities haven't disappeared. By 2025, incidents involving decentralized exchanges accounted for 20 major reports and $535 million in aggregate losses.
That is a staggering amount of money. And a lot of that isn't even external hackers breaking in. It is internal betrayals, like the rug pull.
Right. A rug pull is basically the decentralized equivalent of a pump and dump scheme.
Because the code is open source.
Exactly. Scammers can simply copy-paste the architecture of a legitimate platform, tweak a few lines of code to leave a hidden backdoor, and launch it under a new name.
They hype up the yields?
Yep. They attract millions of dollars from unsuspecting yield farmers and then execute a command that drains the entire liquidity pool. They just vanish.
And furthermore, because anyone can use these protocols without an identity check, the sources point out that DeFi has become a perfect haven for illicit actors.
Terrorist organizations, money launderers.
People looking to obscure their financial footprints, which naturally leads to the most critical tension in this entire deep dive.
The regulation question.
Right. You have this staggering innovation and billions of dollars in value, but it is accompanied by rampant crime and unerasable mistakes. If things are this dangerous, why doesn't someone just step in and stop it?
Because in a truly decentralized system, no one has the power to do so.
Right.
A purely static smart contract, once deployed to the blockchain, cannot be altered or shut down by anyone, not even its creator. It is an unstoppable machine.
But the sources reveal a dirty little secret about the space.
They do.
Most of these platforms aren't actually purely decentralized. They use upgradable contracts that are controlled by governance tokens.
In theory, governance tokens allow the community of users to vote on changes to the protocol, keeping it democratic. But in reality, those tokens are often highly concentrated.
They are hoarded by the original founding team, or the venture capitalists who funded the project, which means a very small, centralized group of people actually holds the keys to upgrade the code.
And this concentration of power leads to one of the most fascinating philosophical clashes in our sources. It's highlighted perfectly by the 2018 Bancor hack.
This is a massive aha moment for understanding the entire ecosystem.
Totally.
Hackers found a vulnerability and managed to steal $23.5 million from the Bancor Decentralized exchange.
A huge hit.
But before the hackers could drain everything, the Bancor development team stepped in, used their administrative keys, and froze the remaining funds to stop the bleeding.
They actively intervened to save their customers' money.
Which sounds like a good thing. But Litecoin creator Charlie Lee pointed out the ultimate paradox here. He argued that if an exchange has the administrative power to freeze customer funds, it isn't actually decentralized at all.
Right.
It is just a traditional centralized company wearing a blockchain disguise.
It forces you to confront a profound contradiction. If your platform is truly decentralized, you are powerless to stop a hack or reverse a stolen transaction. But if you have the power to stop a hack, you are a centralized entity.
And if you are a centralized entity,
You immediately become a target for global regulators.
and regulators have aggressively entered the chat. The Securities and Exchange Commission charged the founder of Ether Delta for operating an unregistered securities exchange. In 2021, the Financial Action Task Force pushed global guidelines targeting virtual asset providers.
And the regulatory landscape shifted permanently in 2024.
The MiCA framework.
Yes, the European Union enforced the markets in crypto assets regulation. It placed massive compliance burdens on stablecoin issuers and custodial services.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, DeFi is being forced into a very uncomfortable maturation phase.
It really is growing up.
To survive these legal crackdowns from 2023 to 2025, many projects realized they had to abandon the utopian dream of pure, lawless decentralization. They are adopting hybrid models.
They are building bridges between the traditional legal system and the blockchain. We're seeing the massive growth of tokenization of real-world assets, or RWAs.
Like what?
Well, platforms are taking traditional financial instruments like U.S. Treasury bills and real estate and putting them on-chain so institutional investors can participate legally.
But to do that, you have to know who is buying them. So how do they solve the identity problem without giving up all their privacy?
By integrating off-chain compliance layers, specifically decentralized identity solutions, or DSD, platforms are utilizing technologies like Polygon ID.
So instead of uploading my passport directly to a public blockchain, I prove my identity off-chain to a trusted verifier.
Yes.
And then they send a cryptographic proof to the smart contract.
Exactly. The smart contract receives a mathematically verified signal that just says, this user has passed a background check and is legally allowed to trade, without ever exposing your actual name or personal data to the public ledger.
The technology is evolving so rapidly to meet these demands. I mean, they're using Layer 2 networks like Arbitrum to process transactions faster and cheaper, away from Ethereum's main bottleneck.
And by early 2025, we even saw AI-powered DeFi agents actively automating risk management and yield strategies.
Like all professionalizing.
We are even seeing decentralized autonomous organizations adopting legal wrappers, forming actual LLCs in specific jurisdictions to protect their members from liability.
So, synthesizing all of this for you, the listener, decentralized finance started as a radical utopian experiment. The mission was to replace the centralized bankers of Wall Street with open-source money Legos.
A noble goal.
It triggered a multi-billion-dollar gold rush that made overnight billionaires out of yield farmers. But it also exposed everyday people to predatory front-running bots, weaponized flash loans, and a system entirely devoid of empathy or a safety net.
Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative question to ponder.
Let's hear it.
As this ecosystem increasingly adopts decentralized identity checks, off-chain legal compliance, and corporate wrappers to appease global regulators, is it actually revolutionizing finance? Or is it destined to slowly transform into the exact same traditional centralized banking system it originally set out to destroy, just running on slightly more complex code?
That is a fascinating paradox, and really the ultimate tension of this entire movement. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those hard questions and keep challenging the systems that govern our world. Catch you next time.
In early 2026, The President of the United States, the FBI, and Congress, they all launched investigations into this string of high-profile assassinations.
Right, targeting the country's top scientists.
Exactly. We're talking about brilliant minds tied to classified UFO programs, anti-gravity technology, all being systematically silenced.
It sounds like a movie.
It really does.
Yeah.
The only problem is none of the murders actually happened.
Yeah, and it is arguably one of the most fascinating mass psychological events of the modern era.
Oh, absolutely.
We watched a completely fabricated narrative just, command the attention of the highest offices in the world. And it was built entirely out of unrelated tragedies.
And that brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are looking at a massive stack of sources today.
A lot of reading for this one.
So much reading. We've got detailed Wikipedia excerpts, victim biographies, psychological analyses from top sociologists, and official statements from U.S. federal officials and the grieving families.
Which are pretty heavy to get through, honestly.
Yeah, they are. But our goal is to unpack the 2026 missing scientists conspiracy theory. We want to understand the mechanics of how a scattered internet rumor, about 10 or 11 supposedly unconnected people, how that morphed into a full-scale federal crisis.
Because the underlying architecture of this theory, it really requires us to look past the sensational headlines.
Right.
We have to examine this collision of human psychology, the weaponization of open-source data, and, well, the undeniable, inescapable statistics of human mortality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the internet looked at these 10 or 11 individuals who died or vanished over a 4-year period and decided, they were taken out for knowing too much.
Right, the classic cover-up angle.
Exactly. But to figure out how we got here, we have to look at the initial spark. The whole phenomenon traces back to February 27th, 2026.
The McCaslin disappearance.
Yes, William Neal McCaslin. He was a 68-year-old retired U.S. Air Force Major General, former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, and he was reported missing by his wife.
Which, that is a heartbreaking situation for any family. A missing elderly relative immediately triggers local law enforcement protocols.
Oh, sure.
But the internet, they didn't see an endangered 68-year-old man. They saw a resume.
Right, but wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if I'm an armchair detective, McCaslin's resume is like an absolute smoking gun.
Sure. On paper.
We are talking about a guy who played a central role in real military investigations into unexplained objects during the Cold War.
Yeah, the UAP stuff.
Right. He identified anomalous phenomena. He was deeply involved in those efforts. And he even had a connection to the Stars, Inc., that organization specifically dedicated to promoting alien theories.
No one, yeah.
So you can't just write that off as a coincidence, can you? If a guy with that specific, highly sensitive background vanishes into thin air, isn't it completely natural for the public to ask questions like maybe his past caught up with him?
Well, if you view his life purely through the lens of a Hollywood thriller, sure.
Fair enough.
But reality rarely conforms to a 3-act structure. The context surrounding McCaslin utterly dismantles the espionage angle.
How so?
First off, he retired 13 years prior to his disappearance.
Okay, that's a long time to be out of the game.
Exactly. And his wife, Susan McCaslin Wilkerson, she explicitly clarified that he only held very standard, common security clearances.
Oh, so the idea that he was harboring deeply classified active state secrets about alien spacecraft in 2026.
It just doesn't hold up to scrutiny, not even slightly.
Wow.
Wilkerson stated it was, highly unlikely anyone took him to extract very dated secrets. And more importantly, she noted he was suffering from a chronic health issue at the time he went missing.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is. The Bernalillo County Sheriff in New Mexico found zero evidence of foul play. This was just an elderly man in a vulnerable medical state.
And yet his disappearance becomes the catalyst for what science writers Michael Shermer and Benjamin Radford call, and I love this phrase, mystery-mongering data mining.
It's a great term for it.
I find this concept incredibly revealing. Instead of investigating McCaslin's actual circumstances, these internet sleuths decided his disappearance was part of a larger plot.
Right, they already had the conclusion.
Exactly. And they just went looking for evidence to support that predetermined conclusion.
It's the classic Texas sharpshooter fallacy, but on a massive digital scale.
The Texas sharpshooter fallacy, explain that for us.
Yeah, so imagine someone firing 100 bullets into the side of a barn.
Okay.
And then they walk up and paint a bullseye around a cluster of bullet holes to make it look like they're a master marksman.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That is exactly what happened here. Theorists scrubbed through obituaries, missing persons reports, local news articles from across the entire country.
Just looking for anything.
Actively hunting for anyone who had recently died or disappeared, and then scanning their biographies for any keyword connected to space, defense, or propulsion.
So they were essentially reverse engineering a conspiracy.
Exactly.
And when you cast a net that wide, across a country of over 330 million people, you're going to find a lot of bullet holes to paint your bullseye around.
You really are.
So let's look at the actual names that ended up on this viral list, because when you contrast the glamorous sci-fi assassin narrative with the brutal medical realities of these people's lives,
It's rough.
it starts to look profoundly disrespectful.
Yeah, the commodification of these individuals' deaths is definitely the darkest part of this phenomenon. You see these brilliant careers and complex human struggles just reduced to plot devices.
Take Dr. Ning Li, for example.
Yeah, that case is wild.
The internet labeled her an anti-gravity physicist who was silenced. But the reality, she was a brilliant scientist at the University of Alabama who died in 2021 at the age of 78 from Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And the sources note this was years after she suffered permanent brain damage from being struck by a vehicle while crossing a street in 2014.
It's just tragic.
It takes a staggering amount of cognitive dissonance to look at an elderly woman deteriorating from Alzheimer's years after a pedestrian traffic accident and classify it as a government assassination.
It really requires stripping away all the medical documentation and focusing solely on her job title. And, the same mechanism was applied to Amy Eskridge.
Right, the 34-year-old.
Yeah, she was a 34-year-old anti-gravity enthusiast who died in 2022. The police investigated and conclusively ruled her death a suicide.
Which the family confirmed, didn't they?
They did. Her family released a statement explicitly stating they did not find her death unusual, noting she had suffered from severe ongoing chronic pain.
But because she worked at the Institute for Exotic Science, and she'd previously made comments on a podcast about psychological warfare stalling her work.
Her tragic, deeply personal battle with chronic pain was completely erased.
Unbelievable.
The internet hijacked her suicide to feed their narrative.
And the net they cast was so desperate, they eventually stopped looking for scientists altogether. I mean, it's like calling a hospital janitor a brain surgeon to make a medical conspiracy sound better.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Melissa Casillas is heavily featured on this list, and she was an administrative assistant.
Yep.
Her only connection to advanced aerospace tech, she happened to work at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Which is a huge facility. Simply being employed in the same zip code as classified research was enough to make her a target for the theorists.
And what actually happened to her?
The New Mexico State Police and her relatives confirmed she was experiencing massive financial stress, and she likely ran away to escape it.
Gosh.
Tragically, her remains were later found in a national forest with a handgun nearby.
That is so awful. And then you have Anthony Chavez on the list, too, a 78-year-old retired construction foreman who went missing in 2025.
Another one with just a geographic tie.
Exactly. His only connection is that he also once worked at Los Alamos. We're talking about a construction foreman and an administrative assistant. The theorists are stretching the definition of aerospace scientists to the breaking point just to keep the list growing.
They really are. And when you zoom out and look at the actual causes of death among the people on this list, the sheer lack of any coherent pattern destroys the idea of a coordinated silencing campaign.
Right, there's no consistency.
None. Michelle David Hicks, a former planetary scientist at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, he died of heart disease. Joshua LeBlanc, an electrical engineer at NASA, died in a mundane traffic collision.
It's just normal, everyday tragedy.
Exactly. Jason Thomas drowned in a lake while battling depression.
And the homicides on the list are even more disconnected, aren't they?
Completely. Carl Grillmeyer, a retired Caltech astronomer, was tragically murdered in a carjacking in California.
Right.
And then Nuno Loureiro, a plasma physicist from MIT, he was killed during the horrific 2025 Brown University mass shooting.
Oh, man, the Brown University shooting.
Yeah, and the FBI and the U.S. Attorney spent massive resources investigating that shooter. They conclusively proved he was a Portuguese national acting out of severe personal dissatisfaction with his social life.
So no government ties at all.
Zero. He had zero nexus to terrorism, the government, or any grand scientific cover-up.
So you have a carjacking, a mass shooting, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and a traffic accident. I mean, the only thread connecting these events is the algorithm that served them to conspiracy theorists.
Which brings up the underlying mathematical reality of this entire situation. And this is perhaps the most compelling piece of our source material today.
Oh, the statistics part. Let's get into this.
Yeah, science writer Mick West absolutely shatters the foundation of this theory using pure demographics.
Okay, break it down for us.
He points out that there are over 700,000 people working in top-secret cleared positions in the U.S. aerospace and nuclear sectors.
700,000. That number is critical to understanding why this theory fails.
It really is. 700,000 people is the population of a major American city, like Denver or Seattle.
Right, so we are dealing with a massive talent pool. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the human brain is notoriously terrible at comprehending large numbers.
We just can't visualize it.
No, we can't. So when you, the listener, hear 10 scientists died, it sounds terrifying. But statistically, across a population of 700,000 people over a 4-year period, what should the actual mortality rate look like? Does the math actually suggest these tragedies are just standard mortality rates playing out?
It should look significantly higher than 10 or 11 people, actually.
Wait, really? Higher?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mick West notes that when you view a population of 700,000 against standard mortality rates, you would normally expect around 250 people in that specific industry to succumb strictly to homicides and suicides over a 4-year span.
250. Just from homicides and suicides.
Yes, and that figure doesn't even account for the thousands more who would naturally pass away from heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, or accidental deaths like traffic collisions.
Wow.
So a list of 10 or 11 people over 4 years is not a statistical anomaly. It is, in fact, remarkably below the expected average for a demographic of that size.
That is wild. But if the math completely debunks the narrative, and the individual police reports debunk the narrative,
Right.
why on earth did this spread so violently? Why did millions of people genuinely believe an invisible hit squad was roaming the country?
Well, because logic and statistics are no match for human evolutionary biology, especially when it's supercharged by social media.
Oh, this is the psychology part.
Right. Medical sociologist Robert Bartholomew points to a concept called apophenia.
Apophenia.
Yeah. It is the psychological tendency to perceive meaningful connections in entirely unrelated events.
It's our brain trying to keep us safe, right? I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, it is better to mistake a rustling bush for a predator and run away than to assume it's just the wind and get eaten.
Precisely. We are hardwired pattern recognition machines.
Right.
But Bartholomew explains that in the digital age, social media algorithms weaponize this trait. The platforms act as a primer.
How so?
Well, a post goes viral claiming there is a coordinated attack on American scientists. That claim plants a seed in your subconscious.
Ah, so because you are explicitly told to look for an assassination plot, your brain starts actively misinterpreting random tragedy as sinister design.
It's a feedback loop. You see a headline about a retired Caltech astronomer dying in a carjacking.
Okay.
If you hadn't been primed, you would recognize it as a tragic instance of random street violence. But because the algorithm has already primed you to expect a pattern, your brain eagerly connects the dots.
The carjacking suddenly becomes a sophisticated, staged hit.
Exactly. And then the algorithm feeds you another post about an Alzheimer's death, and your brain does the exact same thing.
So the algorithm is essentially serving up the puzzle pieces sequentially, creating this highly personalized illusion of a cover-up. But, I have to push back here on the impact of this.
Go ahead.
Because it's one thing for some armchair detectives on Reddit to fall victim to apophenia, but it's entirely another when the most powerful government on Earth starts treating it as a legitimate threat.
That's true.
So what does this all mean for the listener? If this is just a statistical illusion, why are politicians and federal agents with badges and guns getting involved?
Well, that is what elevates this from a standard internet rumor to a unique modern crisis.
Right.
Political scientist Joseph Ushinsky observed that your average fringe conspiracy theory usually dies on the vine, right? It circulates on obscure message boards for a few weeks and fades away.
Yeah, usually.
But this one achieved something rare. It gained institutional momentum.
It didn't just achieve momentum, it breached the highest levels of the U.S. government. Just look at the roster of elected officials who validated this in the sources.
It's quite a list.
It really is. U.S. Representative Eric Burleson formally requested FBI involvement. Representative Tim Burchett publicly speculated that the suicide of David Wilcock, a New Age theorist, wasn't a coincidence.
Yep.
House Oversight Chair James Comer went on record stating the deaths were unlikely to be a coincidence. Even President Donald Trump weighed in, calling the situation pretty serious stuff.
And see, when elected officials begin repeating internet rumors, it forces a bureaucratic response.
Well, it has to.
The institutions of government are designed to react to congressional and executive pressure.
Which perfectly explains that incredible statement from the White House. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed they were actively working with all relevant agencies and the FBI to holistically review the cases.
Right.
The FBI themselves announced they were spearheading an effort to look for connections. They deployed real agents to investigate a phantom threat.
And that creates the ultimate destructive paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, when the government announces an investigation to appease political pressure, the conspiracy theorists don't view it as a routine bureaucratic review.
Oh, I see.
They view it as total vindication. They point to the White House and say, look, the FBI is involved. Even the president says it's serious. We were right all along.
Wow. So the attempt to calm the hysteria actually acts as gasoline.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of suspicion.
That's fascinating. But while the politicians and the theorists are playing this grand game of algorithmic validation, there is a brutal real-world fallout occurring entirely off-screen.
Yeah, the families.
Exactly. The toll this takes on the families of the deceased is almost impossible to quantify.
They are forced to watch their darkest, most agonizing moments be stripped of all context and repurposed as entertainment.
The sources detail some incredibly painful reactions from the relatives. Like Michelle David Hicks' brother. He gave a statement expressing profound anguish over his brother's legacy.
I remember reading that.
He pointed out that Michelle had great, tangible scientific achievements, but instead of being remembered for his brilliance, his entire life's work is being overshadowed by what his brother called a baloney Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot conspiracy theory.
It's just sad. And Carl Gruomer's widow was equally devastated. She publicly called the entire narrative absolute nonsense, noting the bitter irony that her husband, a rigorous scientist, would have laughed at the people propagating it.
And the family of Melissa Cassius, they just wanted to mourn a loved one who succumbed to financial stress. They had to repeatedly go to the press to reiterate that she ran away on her own.
They had the New Mexico State Police backing them up, too.
Right, but the internet didn't care. Journalist Mike Rothschild described the situation flawlessly. He called it family trauma that's essentially being monetized for clicks.
Monetized for clicks. That captures the exact mechanism at play perfectly.
It really does.
Content creators realize that a sprawling sci-fi assassination plot generates far more ad revenue and engagement than explaining the mundane tragedy of heart disease or the devastating reality of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Colleagues of these researchers, like planetary scientist Joe Mazzero at Caltech, they've spoken out about the profound lack of empathy required to turn human beings into puzzle pieces just to drive social media traffic.
So what does this actually mean for you, the listener, as you navigate an increasingly chaotic digital landscape?
It's a big question.
We live in an era overflowing with access to information. But alongside that access comes our deeply human evolutionary desire for an overarching narrative.
We desperately want the world to make sense.
Exactly. We want there to be a hidden hand, a secret plot, a villain pulling the strings. Because acknowledging a shadow government is often far less terrifying than facing the messy, unconnected, and entirely random realities of mortality.
It is psychologically easier to believe an all-powerful agency orchestrated a grand cover-up than it is to accept that a brilliant world-class physicist can be slowly undone by a disease like Alzheimer's.
Right.
Or that a vibrant, successful life can be extinguished in a split second by a random traffic collision. We use conspiracy theories as a shield against the randomness of the universe.
It is a profound cautionary tale about how easily human tragedy can be commodified into entertainment, but it also leaves us staring down a rather terrifying horizon regarding the future of information itself.
Oh, absolutely. Because think about this. If our current, highly connected digital age allows disparate human tragedies to be manually assembled by internet users into a global mystery narrative, often before a grieving family even has time to hold a funeral, what happens next?
What do you mean?
We are on the precipice of an era where artificial intelligence will be capable of performing this exact type of mystery-mongering data mining in milliseconds. Imagine an AI trained to maximize engagement, instantly scrubbing millions of obituaries, finding invisible statistical anomalies, and generating flawless, undebunkable conspiracy theories faster than any human journalist could ever fact-check them.
That is terrifying.
If we are this susceptible to a clumsy, user-generated illusion today, How must we adapt our critical thinking to survive the flawlessly engineered illusions of tomorrow?
That is the real puzzle we need to solve. Because if we don't learn how to separate the noise of the internet from the actual plot of reality, we might find ourselves chasing shadows forever. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.